Australian researchers are part of a new discovery in diagnosing Alzheimer's, having developed a world-first blood test which can detect the disease 30 years before symptoms are even noticed.
The breakthrough could speed up the progress of clinical trials to treat the brain disease. Dementia is the second leading cause of death in Australia, with more than 400,000 people living with the condition.
And for the last 7 years, Dr. Helena Popovic has been caring for her father who has dementia, and she joins us now live from the Gold Coast with more on this exciting breakthrough. Helena, good afternoon to you. What do you make of this new blood test?
I want the blood test because up until now we've never had a definitive test for Alzheimer's. Well, unless you have a really expensive PET scan or unless you have a really invasive lumbar puncture, which people don't. And up until now, it's taken years, sometimes a decade, to diagnose Alzheimer's through multiple blood tests, mental tests, brain scans, and even then it hasn't been certain. Now, with one single simple blood test, they spin down to the plasma, they remove the red and white blood cells, and they've detected part of a protein that indicates you're getting build-up of beta amyloid in the brain. And beta amyloid is the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common type of dementia in Australia. And they've found the accuracy of the test is 90%. Brilliant.
How can you detect something so far in advance?
Because the pathology in the brain starts decades. Amyloid starts to build up decades before you get symptoms, and slowly brain function is eroded, but we can compensate while we're young. So they're not, there's no symptoms until you've actually had this process going on for decades.
Right, so let's say we do test, positive, and it seems as though we could face Alzheimer's at some point. Is there then something we can do, lifestyle changes perhaps, that can avert that risk?
A lot, and that's the exciting thing. This is a crucial disease to detect early because there's so much we can do. First and foremost, get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. It sounds trivial, but chronic sleep deprivation actually leads to build-up of more amyloid in the brain. Secondly, manage stress, because stress produces cortisol, and the chemical cortisol enters the brain and actually kills cells in the hippocampus, which is the learning and memory warehouse of the brain. Then dramatically cut down your intake of sugar in processed foods, no more than 4 teaspoons or 17 grams a day, because sugar actually disrupts communication between brain cells, leads to build-up of toxic material in the brain. And then there's the things we've talked about for years, which is mental challenges. Learn new things all your life. Keep doing crosswords and Sudoku, but they're only good for you while you're not good at them. And once you master them, you've got to learn something new. And then the other big one is 20 minutes of exercise a day. Now that can be as simple as a walk, gardening, strenuous housework, dancing, swimming. You don't have to go maniac at the gym. Any kind of movement helps. And meaningful relationships. This is an extraordinary one. The more closely we feel connected to other people, the better our relationships, the better our brain works. And volunteer work actually changes the structure of the brain and protects it from getting memory loss and Alzheimer's.
Wow, that's an interesting one I wasn't expecting.
Yes.
Helena, have there been any other significant medical developments in the fight against Alzheimer's?
Really interesting things. In a nursing home in Boston, they're actually stimulating the brains of people with mild to moderate Alzheimer's. They're giving them sound wave therapy, low-pitched sounds, about the lowest E on a piano, coupled with flickering lights and vibrating pads on their hands for an hour a day. Now, bizarre as that sounds, what they find is that the sound waves and all those vibrations actually help to break down the amyloid that's building up in the brain. And when they tested this in mice and then they sliced their brains and looked at them under a microscope, there were only half as many amyloid plaques in key memory areas of the brain in mice that had been treated with sound waves compared with those that haven't. And they're really optimistic that it'll have the same effect on humans.
Helena, just quickly, what are some of the signs we can look out for if we maybe suspect our loved ones may be going down this path?
The first thing is they start to forget how to do things they used to be able to do really easily, or they get lost when it's somewhere they've been so often, confused and agitated, and also their anxiety increases after the sun goes down. It's called sundowning. If your relative becomes more stressed, frustrated, confused after sunset, that could be a sign. Also, they become more gullible, which is an interesting one, because they lose their capacity for judgment. They may become more flirtatious, personality changes. If they become aware that something's going on, they then become withdrawn. They lose their motivation and interest to do things, and particularly they don't want to socialise because they're scared that they'll be discovered.
Great, it's great
So a
science.
lot of different things, but a lot of promise.
A lot
it's
of
all in my
promise
book.
and a lot of hope for that new test, which is great. Helena,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Helena. Straight